So, the business case for sustainability, that was, I suppose, the moral case. We'll now look at why you should do this as a business. This is a review done by the organisation Business in the Community, and it found that the companies that they'd identified as being good at corporate social responsibility or sustainability, whatever you want to call it, outperformed the average by between 3.3 and 7.7% over those few years. Now you could argue, is that, where's the chicken, where's the egg? Is that because good businesses tend to have good CSR, or does CSR make a good business? I would argue it's a virtuous circle between the two. But certainly from these organisations' point of view, having good CSR or sustainability performance is not a hindrance on their performance. We're obviously in a recession, and a lot of people have said, can we really go green in a recession? Well, here's another review. They looked at 18 different industries, and in 16 of them, the greener, more enlightened companies outperformed the others by 15% in those 6 months, which is at the depths of the recession. So going green, we're getting quite a good evidence base that going green actually makes your business recession-proof rather than being seen as some sort of expensive add-on, expensive luxury. Looking at the drivers for why you'd want to be clean and green, traditionally divided into sticks and carrots. For heavy industry, legislation's always been the key driver, but the service sector has never been hit by this as much. There are quite a few organisations here today who will be coming under the carbon reduction commitment in April. Does anybody want to put their hand up and say, yes, us? We come under CRC? No, that's a bit worrying because I know that a lot of you do, and you should know about it because it's going to be quite tough. And for the first time, these large service sector organisations or large public sector bodies like councils and the larger universities are going to be required to report their carbon emissions, buy allowances for those carbon emissions, and then trade between each other. So companies who manage to reduce their impacts benefit from those trades. It's a very complex system. I'm not going to go through it today but for the first time, service sector organisations are being pushed by legislation on this agenda. One other thing, there's little bits of legislation that will pick up on you as well. Things like the WE directive, which means that you can't just throw your old computers in a skip. You have to make sure they're recycled properly. The battery directive's just started, which has similar requirements. So there's lots of little bits of legislation. But the service sector has not been pushed the way heavy industry like chemical factories, pharmaceutical factories would come under things like the European Emissions Trading Scheme. And likewise, things like utility price rises, you're less sensitive to that because your biggest expenditure is people rather than resources. Whereas if you took a chemical plant, they spend an awful lot on energy, a lot less on people because they've got fewer people on site. But the proactive companies are starting to look at the carrots. What are the opportunities here? And traditionally, people have said, go green, save money. Switch off the lights and save money. But again, as that isn't a big part of your turnover compared to salaries, there's not really much in it for the service sector on that side. Another problem, as we'll see, is many of you don't own the buildings that you operate out of, so you have very little control over how efficient your heating or cooling systems are. But even there, it's these top ones. Even in heavy industry, it's the green markets, the opportunities to get new business that are starting to really dominate. And the global market for environmental and low carbon services and products is £3 trillion. And that doesn't include going to Body Shop and buying ethically friendly products like that. In the UK, that market's worth 32 billion. So it's huge sums of money. But where a lot of people are starting to find the benefits here is tender differentiation. If you're tendering to the public sector, they're putting more and more green procurement requirements upon you. It's no longer enough just to hand somebody environmental policy and say, look, we take all this seriously. You know, I was at an organisation not so very long ago, a small logistics company, and they have a wind turbine outside their factory. It's a big long story about how long it took them to get the wind turbine up. But they're finding that's winning them business, because they're based in Edinburgh, they're saying to the Scottish Executive and local councils, look, we don't just have policy, we've got this whopping great wind turbine, and we're investing in electric vehicles. So full marks on environmental performance, and they're finding that's tipping them over into winning new business. So a few issues here as well about staff morale. If you ask people, overwhelmingly people will say, we want to work for greener companies. Whether they do or not practice is always a different matter. But there is a big issue there. And some companies are saying we're actually being pushed faster by our staff than the company can keep up with. British Telecom I've been speaking to recently. They've been saving, in terms of cost savings, they've been saving £100 million a year through their green activities, which is very impressive, and I'm sure the chief executive would say that's great. But the big number is £1.9 billion worth of business they reckon they've brought in because they're green. So that's 19 times bigger than the direct cost savings. So if anybody ever comes to you and says, go green, save money, think to yourself, there's a much more to it than that, because they could afford to make that minus £10 million. They could lose 10 million on this and still come out profiting, because they've taken that bigger picture of what are the business opportunities. And the most famous example of this is Plan A with Marks and Spencer's. They put 200 million quid into Plan A. Has everybody seen this? When you walk down Northumberland Street, Newcastle, it will say Plan A, have this logo out on the little barriers around their cafe and everything. They put 200 million quid into Plan A, and they weren't expecting a return. They've made a profit already. It was a 5-year program. It's not quite finished, but they've already got their money back and more. They won't tell you how much, because for them this is part of their branding. Marks and Spencer's as a trusted brand on the high street, an organisation you can rely on. And they think if they start bandying about, we've saved so many £1 million, you'll actually think, well, you only did it for commercial reasons. So the branding is a key issue here. And that's why we've got Graham Mills speaking later on, because for the service sector, this is even more so. You're not going to save a huge amount of money through going green or being more sustainable, but it can get you in a lot more business. But you have to be careful about how you do that branding as well. And I like the Marks and Spencer's branding. You might have seen this advert over the summer. It says, for some retailers, green went out of fashion as quickly as it came in. And this is really strong branding. This isn't people holding a plant or a little sapling or any of those cliches I absolutely detest. You know, glamorous model, green dress, you get the message. And it's very strong. It's basically, you know, deriding other organisations for, in the midst of the recession, saying green's too expensive for us. So, but that's all I'm going to say on branding. I'm going to leave the rest to Graham later on. I mentioned recruitment and retention. 43% of job hunters said that even if they were offered £10,000 more to work for a company with poor CSR credentials, they wouldn't take the job. I'd be interested to see if they actually did that in practice, because there's always an intention activity